Have you met this one?
Excuse my cat didn't want me to leave.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Booksmith. My name is Katie McCarthy. I'm one of the event coordinators here. Thank you all so much for coming out to support your local independent bookstore. And at this time, if you could just shut off your cell phone ringers, that would be really wonderful. Thank you. We have so many excellent events coming up here at the Booksmith, so please grab an events calendar. We have them over on the counter there. On Wednesday afternoon, we have the answer to the perennial question, where's Waldo? And he will be here at the Booksmith with, yes, Waldo. You can take a picture with Waldo. And there'll be games and a costume contest and snacks, and it's for all ages. So come and join us on Wednesday afternoon. And on Thursday, we have some excellent local poets. And to stay up to date, please join our weekly email list, B-mail. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And tonight we have two wonderful authors of mystery joining us for their latest installments in series that follow two unlikely but brainy sleuths. We have Clea Simon's bookish Harvard grad student Dulce Schwartz, and Sheila Connolly's Pennsylvania Antiquarian Society president Mel Pratt. And in the third installment in the Dulce Schwartz series, she wonders if the chilling hunch she dismissed one gloomy evening had anything to do with the brutal assault of a fellow university student who happened to look exactly like her. And once again, she can't resist a little gumshoeing, and with the help of her kitten Esme and the ghost of her cat Mr. Gray, she is guided toward answers. And in Sheila Connolly's latest installment in her Museum Mystery series, someone's been killing off the elderly benefactors of cultural organizations in Philadelphia. And can she figure out the motive? So we are so excited to have them here with us tonight. And this will be filmed for Brookline Access TV, so you can catch it again and watch it over and over. So please give a big Brookline welcome to Clea Simon and to Sheila Connolly.
Thank you. I don't, if anyone can't hear us, so you can pass this back and forth, but I feel like you can. We both thought, and we can, obviously this is a congenial crew, we can open this up any way we want, but we both thought that one way to approach this evening was to talk about the fact that we both write multiple mystery series at once, because this probably happens to you as well. People are always going, how do you keep it straight in your head, and how do you do it? So we're going to chat among ourselves, between ourselves a little bit, and then at some point, if you guys have questions, just, we'll ask you, or feel free to interrupt us. But I guess just to get started, we're easy. And then, of course, we'll be signing books, because books make great gifts.
We do know each other, so this is not totally out of the blue.
And actually, I think I thought of this first because we were at it was the New England Crime Bake, and I heard you were doing 3 mystery series, and I was panicking because I was writing 2 mystery series at once, and I asked you, how do you do it? So now, for posterity, how do you do
On the
it?
record, chair's collapsing. Well, it sort of grew. It's funny because I've always been a fast reader, but I didn't start writing until a little over 10 years ago. I was storing it all up. And the first series I wrote was under a pen name for Berkeley Prime Crime, which was very nice, except it stopped. The series ended at 3. But since they seemed to like me, they bought my first series under my name, The Orchard Mysteries. So for a while I was doing one of each, and I said, hey, this is easy. I can do 2 at once. So I did. The Glassblowing Mysteries stopped. I was writing the Orchard Mysteries, which I'm now working on number 8, and I had a void there, and I said, okay, I can still do more. Let's do the Museum Mysteries. And
If I can jump in, how long do you get to write a book when you're writing series?
well, when I'm doing 3 of them, or when I'm doing one of them?
Well, at that point, how long did you have to write a book?
Well, in the real world, I can do it in 3 months. But I mean, I had to learn that, because I had no idea. When I started writing, I did not know how long a book was. I'm sitting there holding paperbacks and counting pages and words on the page and saying, are we done with this yet? Is it finished? I didn't know. So I did not know how long it would take, and then of course you don't know about all the edits they send back and say, fix this, and by the way, the plot doesn't work. So that takes an expanding amount of time, and then the copy edit. So now that we have several going in sync, it's actually a year from the time I turn it in till it gets to the shelf. So, except that my editor keeps having babies and she's usually several months behind. So, I didn't see the last round of edits till 5 months after I gave it to her, so it kind of shrunk the schedule. But I can write the draft in 3 months. In fact, I just wrote one for a book that's not even under contract in like 3 weeks. Needs work.
Wow, and this is 70,000 words, 80,000?
Yeah, roughly. That's what the contract says.
But, so I interrupted you, how did you end up writing 3?
Well, the Orchard Mysteries were based on a house that I discovered that was built by my 7th great-grandfather in western Massachusetts, and I fell in love with the house. So I had to put a series in the house, but since I know everybody who's lived there for the past 300 years, I've got lots to work with. The Museum Mysteries is based on the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, where I worked for several years, and I like the contrast. One is rural woman running an apple orchard, the other one is Center City, Philadelphia. Very different problems, very different people doing it. And then there's the third series, which is one I actually started way back when I started writing. It's set in Ireland. And I kept pitching it to my publisher, Berkeley, and they kept saying, what? Why? So it took several years to convince them they really wanted to do an Irish-based series. It's an American heroine, but it is set in small-town Ireland, which made perfect sense because it's just the whole cozy genre transplanted to Ireland, where everybody knows everything, remembers everything, knew your grandparents and so on. And apparently I was right because it was a bestseller. So I think they believe me now.
Does everyone know what a cozy is? A cozy is, they say the blood is dry before it hits the page. It's the kind of mystery that doesn't have a lot of harsh language, overt violence, or overt sex. And they tend to be the sort of traditional mysteries, like the Agatha Christie style, where it's often set like in a small town or like, an English country home, that kind of thing. And it's an amateur sleuth. So it's the idea is that the reader could be a stand-in for the sleuth, and all the clues are given. There's not, you're not supposed to have a Deus Ex Machina come in. Everything is supposed to be right there, so you could solve it yourself. So it's a very traditional mystery, and they're cozies in the genre. So when we say cozy, we both write cozies. I think it's interesting that you write all your books for the same publisher, because I don't think I would have ended up writing multiple series if I was with the same publisher, because I had a series, the Theater Krakow series.
Which I liked.
Thank you.
I read all of those.
I'd like to revisit it at some point. Actually, I pitched a book half-heartedly based on one of the side characters, Violet, a lesbian punk rocker. And I was sort of sick of my editor, and she was kind of sick of me, and she was like, no, forget it. So the series is tired. So I wrote the first Dulcie Schwartz book, Shades of Grey. And it was while we were shopping that around, and I specifically wanted to go with a different publisher. It was like, please get something out there. So while that was being shopped around, and I was getting a lot of rejections, then I wrote Dogs Don't Lie, which was the first Prue Marlowe. And so for me, it was a case where they both sold. And I didn't originally see the Dulcie books as a series, and actually I'm now on the 6th Dulcie. Is that right? I think that's right. Shades of Grey, Grey Matters, Grey Zoned.
I have 7 here.
I had to check. You remember one? Grey Matters, True Grey, Shades of Grey, Grey Expectations, Grey Zone. Grey Howl is the one that I'm getting. I have the edits back. I'm supposedly getting the edits back. I got the copy for the cover. But speaking of, my editor was out sick for a few weeks, so I haven't gotten the edits back. But the marketing people asked me for the copy, or asked me for something, so I sent something to them, and that's why today I got the cover copy. I was like, oh, this reads pretty well. It's like, yes, I wrote it. I actually know what the book says. But so before Dulcie sold, I then wrote Dogs Don't Lie, and that sold, and then the editor who bought Dulcie wanted that, but only if she could buy 2. She was like, they wanted. So, and then each time they just keep renewing, so that's how I'm now writing 2 series.
A good situation to be in.
It is a good situation, except with different publishers, you don't coordinate.
Right.
I was sort of between contracts, and I knew that they wanted my books, and I was just relaxing. But, so November and December, I sort of didn't do much writing. And then in December, I got 2 contracts. So basically, in January, I signed a contract for my next bunch of books. The first Dulcie in the new set of contracts was due May 31st, and the first Prue was due June 1st. At the time, it seemed quite reasonable.
Months and months away.
Months and months away. I was telling my friends, I actually have a physical injury, which I think is directly related, because I stopped working out because basically the month of May, some of April, I did nothing but sit at my computer and write, and like John would come upstairs and go like, it's 10 o'clock, do you want to come down and eat dinner? I was like, no. And I stopped working out, and so once I finally got these books off, and one of them I got off on time, and one of them I got off like 10 days late, I was very proud of that. And I think it's in English, because I've gotten edits back on that one, and they seem to regard it as a real book. Thank God. So I immediately picked up my weights again and started working out again, with the result that I did something to my arm, and it's a month and a half later, and I still can't really lift this arm. So
Does it affect your keyboard skills?
it doesn't. No. What it affects is when you drive into a parking garage and you have to reach for the thing. I can't do that, so I have to sit down. But now the next thing I have is a book due November, which of course I haven't started yet. But I will start in September.
Yeah.
So it'll be September, October, November, and then the next one's not due till next April. So piece of cake.
No problem. Yeah, my next one's due October 1st, so.
Have you started it?
Oh, yes,
Last
week.
Oh, last week. Okay.
It's moving right along.
So what's your process? I know we didn't talk about this, but I'm just curious.
That's true. Get up in the morning, have coffee, breakfast, feed the cats, sit down at the computer, sit there for several hours. Of course, there's always the stuff that goes with it, the emails and reading the blogs and promotion and
Facebook.
Yep, all that stuff. So that's at least an hour out of that. Then write, then have a 20-minute lunch, then go back to the desk and the keyboard and write until the brain stops producing anything that's coherent, which is usually like between 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Do you do a
Repeat.
certain number of words per day, or how do you measure your day? In
It's
teaspoons.
usually I write a chapter, a complete unit. My chapters are, like 2,500 words average. So if I write a chapter a day, I'm happy. Yeah.
I'm sort of I have to make myself. Deadline scares me. So what I usually do when I'm starting is I take the total word count of what I'm aiming for. Like the Prue books tend to be about 83 to 85,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
The Dulcies are supposed to be under 80,000, but I always sort of nudge up against it.
Mm-hmm.
For those of us who think in terms of pages rather than words, can you translate?
Easily. The Prue book seems to be 268 pages, and the Dulcie books I've learned. My publisher always sets the same page count. I don't know if you do this. So
I think it's just a standard.
if I write too long, they make the type smaller.
Exactly.
So I
Which is
can't
not
write
fair to a lot of
Yeah.
readers who are not young.
Yeah. So these seem to be 214 pages. Even though, so that's actually, the first one I wrote was too long, and the type is too small.
Yeah. Think about it.
But I take the word count, for me I take the total word count, and I figure, how many days I have to write, and I divvy it up. And so usually it comes out to, I have to write 2,000 words a day, or something like that.
That's a good amount.
And it allows like 3 weeks at the end to read it through and
Right,
revise it.
right.
And when you get into it, you write more, So
Yes.
it's like,
If you've got a thought, you don't want to lose it.
yeah. But when I'm starting, it's like I'm just stringing lots of adjectives together, and it takes about a month before I'm, copying it. And it's nice to have a word limit for me, because then when you go above it,
What do you do with your first page? How do you get it rolling?
I agonize horribly. With the Prues, it's kind of easier for me because I like to start with things like Polly didn't want a cracker. Polly didn't want much of anything anymore. Polly Larkin, a.k.a. Room 203, had been dead several hours when her aide came to wake her. That's
catchy.
Thank you. Prue has an attitude, so those are easier. with the Dulcies, I have problems because there's a lot I want to do. Dulcie is doing research. She's a graduate student, and she's doing research on a mythical, because I could not find one that fit my needs, Gothic manuscript. So a novel from the 1790s, which only part survives, though I think she may be ready to find another part. So she's got that. She's got the ghost cat. She's got the boyfriend who now has a more active role because my agent said that he needed a more active role, so he has a more active role in Grey Howl. She's got the new kitten Esme, who may or may not be able to talk, and then somehow or other a werewolf came up in the latest book, who's continuing. And so it's really difficult to try to get that all in the first page. So the werewolf is useful because now I start with, in fact, I think I start this with a howl. Does it show up on the first page? I think he does. He or she, wolves. The word sprang unbidden into Dulcie's mind. Wolf, she amended it, as the unearthly howl once more split the night. So,
Okay.
how do you start?
I kind of wait until a line shows up. And, you know, everybody, all the
But you can't wait that long. You gotta do it.
But it's the trigger, it's what gets things rolling. Like, I had one in which the first line was, "They're all dead." We were talking about a beehive, but you don't know that when you start reading. You know? The current one is, "This town has gone crazy." You know? But that's just enough to get things moving forward. And of course, I don't know about you, but I'm not much of a planner. I have a general idea where it's going, but I do not write detailed outlines. I do not have this great scheme. I just sit down and start writing. And sometimes things happen that you didn't expect. And, oh, that would be interesting, wouldn't it?
I want to ask you about that more, but I'm totally the same way. Partly, who has the time to outline? Because we've got deadlines.
Yeah.
And partly, I find that if you outline too much, because I've tried it, it takes the juice out of it.
Right.
Because why write the book if you know, Lee, what? If you know what you're going to write, what were you going to say?
Yeah, well, I was wondering, and you sort of led into this well with your little readings there, with your two series, your voice is different.
That's one of the things we were going to talk about.
It's one of our questions.
Oh, okay, and I was just wondering if you have days, like if you're juggling two books, if you have days when you just, I'm sorry, I just can't do Dulcie today, I have to do Crew, or
Nice or nasty.
or
Yeah.
Fast.
She's just not talking to you today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I can't do that because I have to write them. I can't write them both at once. I really need to get into one mindset before I do, and so I have to draft a book. I mean, this last spring, which was just nutty, I was like, I drafted one, I thought it was drafted, it wasn't really, the end was really, really sketchy, but I was like, okay, that's done, and then I finished the other, but then I went back, and it's like when I went back to Prue, I realized that several crucial scenes, I thought it was a draft, and I was just going to polish it and send it off. Several crucial scenes had not been written. I mean, they were in my head. I sort of knew I needed it. And I'm reading it, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait till this happens. And it wasn't there.
Yeah.
But I do find it sort of sometimes difficult to switch between voices. Because they are different.
Absolutely.
To you.
Well, one of the best answers I came up with without thinking was at Crimebake last year, because somebody in the audience at a panel said, well, how do you keep your characters straight?
Yeah.
And I said, well, you know, after you've been writing them for a while, they're like friends. You don't confuse your friends. They're different people. They sound different to you. They speak differently. So yeah, it's very hard to just head hop between different people.
But do you work on manuscripts at the same time? I mean, I know that we have edits and copy edits, but do you write
Well,
at
you
the
really,
same
you
time?
do have to sort of pull yourself out of one and
Yeah.
drop yourself back in the other. No, it's hard to do them at the same time. When I was younger, like 10 years ago, it was easier, but no, I think when you get invested in your characters, you have to be inside them. Sometimes, you know, when you get to the end of the book, you really have to haul yourself out. You know, you're just so embedded in the book and the character.
Which does make writing series good, though.
Mm.
I mean,
You don't want them to go away.
Yeah, it must be horrible to write a standalone of this kind. Have you written a standalone?
A couple, but there's always that the door is open to follow up if anybody wants it. You know?
Yeah,
I don't kill them at the end.
I've never written standalone fiction, just nonfiction. And yeah, it's horrible when the book's over.
Yeah, you miss them.
So, do you want to talk more about separating the voices, or
The
what
voices in
part
your
of
head.
the voices in your head, or what part of you is in your heroine?
Well, yeah, that was a question we were kicking around before, that, do you write yourself? Do you try to write the self you wish you were? I mean, I love it when you know an author who's 5'2" and mild-mannered, and she's writing this 5'10" red-haired wild woman. So, no, this isn't you, is it? But sometimes you can say what you'd like to say in it, and some just have snarkier voices. It's also when you write third person versus first person, because that feels very different.
Yeah.
I don't know which, do you do both in yours?
I guess Dulcie's third person. I forget. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And Prue is first person.
Yeah, so like the Museum Mysteries is first
Yes.
person, and she's much snarkier. I mean, even if she doesn't voice it, you can hear her thoughts, and she's much more sarcastic, she's much more ironic about the whole thing. So you feel closer to first person than third person.
So how do you decide if it's going to be a first person or third person?
Well, you just hear it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you don't say, I want this to be an intimate book, therefore it must be first person. It's just, she has a voice.
I think I consciously, I'm trying to remember, because it's all fried.
No,
I
purge the
can't-
databanks.
Okay, thank you, yes. Not fried, it's intentional. I think I did consciously make Dulcie third person because my first series was first person, and I wanted to differentiate it, and I also thought it might make it easier to sell. But now it is what it is. And actually, first person sort of sneaks in, and which is a whole other issue, and you have to subjective third person. I get very confused, and this is why, my husband reads my books, and my agent reads them, and my editor reads them, and usually John is the one who catches it and says, well, you're getting a little too first person. And Prue is all voice for me, so she had to be first person. So how did you decide who became what?
It was kind of based on the character, because like in the Orchard Mysteries, my heroine, Meg, always felt kind of tentative, like, she's been gobsmacked by life. She's lost her job, her apartment lease is up, her boyfriend, with whom she wasn't terribly intimate, but, he just says, you're not good enough, goodbye. And she had no idea what she's doing, so she's kind of in a fog. And it was easier to do that third person, because there was some distance there. And it seems to work, but Nell Pratt in the Museum Mysteries is much more immediate, and I more or less held the job that she had, so I'm seeing it through my own eyes anyway. But then the Irish one is different because it's a much younger woman. Yeah, I'm writing a 25-year-old. I just use my daughter as a model. But again, she's lost the only family she had, and her grandmother wanted her to go to Ireland, and she gets to Ireland, and suddenly she has all these relatives she never knew about. Everybody knows all about her life. She didn't even know they existed. And, at some point she more or less bursts into tears and says, why are you all being so nice to me? But she starts out with that sort of distance from it. Of course you can't switch in midstream. You can't change voice once you're committed to it.
Yeah. This isn't something we've talked about. And so I apologize, and you can just pass this, you can just log this back to me. Have you gotten stuck in anything in your series that you regret?
You mean something I created?
Yeah, like you can't change things after a while.
Yeah,
I
you
know
have
I
to live
have,
with
this is,
Not really. I mean, one of the tricks is you have to remember everything you've said. I mean, you can't
Yeah.
have somebody being tall and blue-eyed in book 1 and short and red-haired in book 2, and,
Yeah.
So but yeah, if you have characters, you either have to convincingly eliminate them or keep bringing them back again. And sometimes that can be annoying. And they grow. I mean, you suddenly have 15 characters where you started with 3.
I think that's for me is the hardest thing. With the Dulcie books, I mean, by the time you get up to 6 books in a series, you have so many characters. And I guess the next one, Gray Howl, the one that comes out in November, I have her, she's dealing with a weekend conference, which is my version of the English, country house weekend mystery. It's an academic conference. And so I really got to narrow down the characters who are involved. But it's like there's this whole, do I bring somebody likes this character, and
Yeah, well, yeah, people, if the readers are paying attention, somebody's going to write and say, what happened to so-and-so? On vacation? Got another job? I don't know.
I forgot
he
about
existed.
Have you ever been caught out in an inconsistency?
As opposed to a typo. I mean, sometimes you forget to change a name when
Oh,
you're
God.
copy editing, but that's a different problem.
I caught a name change on, I guess it was this one, Grey Dawn, on page proofs. And by this point, I've read it a couple of times.
Sure.
John's read it, the agents read it, the editors read it several times, and it had been copy edited.
Mm-hmm.
And on my page proofs, it was a minor character, but his name just changed. And I remembered that he used to be something else. And I was like, you can go into a cold sweat, because this is the next thing to going to print. And
Yes.
suddenly this character's name, it is the same character. And it's like in the middle of a conversation, for the rest of the book,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
still the old name.
I've seen that, but that does have, the worst one I found, and it wasn't mine, thank goodness, was I read the book and somebody was very thrilled about having a new grandchild, a lovely bouncing girl, and 10 pages later it was a boy.
I'm sorry,
Wait a minute, I literally stopped in and had to go back and look, and yes, it changed gender in there.
Oh, my heart goes out to that author.
No, I did not write the author and tell him.
No, I'm sure she or
But
he is.
all those eyes who go over it, and you still miss things like that.
Yeah. I almost had a gun with a wooden barrel. Put that on proofs.
I didn't know how you do that.
Yeah, it would not work too well.
And then, of course, those of us who are slightly older, our younger editors are saying, why don't you give her a cell phone? Oh, yeah, we could do that, couldn't we?
I finally got a smartphone, so now
I got it last year.
Well, now I know what I'm talking. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, because you have to.
But everybody assumes now, and you do have to be able to communicate. If you're up in the orchard and somebody else is halfway across the county, you can't trek down to the nearest phone.
But we can use dead zones.
True.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was a lot easier to write crime fiction when people weren't always so wired.
Yes, yes. And you can't fall back on the, I forgot to charge it excuse either.
Well, I think you can once, probably
Yeah, but
once
not
in a career.
all
I
the
haven't
time.
used that yet. I don't think. No. Just she's turned it off because she's in the library,
Mhm.
and so she didn't get the important. That I lean on a bit.
Mhm.
I should stop doing that.
But it's weird. I mean, as I say, I'm writing the 8th Orchard Mystery now, and it's the first one where I've actually felt comfortable having her have a phone at all times. It's become natural for her, just as it's slowly becoming natural for me.
I may have to start doing it. Who is it? Is it Sue Grafton, whose characters are always in the 70s?
Yes,
Yeah,
forever.
yeah. I think my mind is.
It's simpler. No computers.
No, we talked a little about the holdback. I was saying, do you hold anything back for your next book?
Well, I laughed at her question because my answer is, you mean I'm supposed to know where I'm going with this? I don't plan that far ahead. Also, when you're writing, you don't know how long your series is going to be. It may stop at 3. It may get extended to 20. So how do you pace a story?
Well, you
And
guys have a couple of books ahead of time, right? I mean, like I've got 2 more Proust on contract
Not
and
really.
another Dulce. Really?
I mean, I
Book
have the
by book?
contracts, but I have no idea what's happening in them. And neither does my editor ask, and that's very individual. I think it depends on the writer and the editor. But I've been lucky. They don't expect me to outline or give them a synopsis. They just pat me on the head and say, go write the next one. Thank you. I can do that.
But do you have things that you, well, for me, this is a leading question. I'm asking this because with the Dulce werewolf situation,
Did you plan on a werewolf?
I didn't plan on a werewolf. I had got a werewolf, and I sort of realized when I was finishing the manuscript that I hadn't resolved the werewolf. And so I was like, aha, this is something for the next book. And so I just tell people it's intentional. And in the next one, Grey Howl, and the title doesn't have much to do with the book, but we couldn't come up with a title, and my agent, oh my god, that's great. I like it's good title, Grey Howl. The werewolf theme is explored, but this time I intentionally leave it a little open-ended. If you're a careful reader, at the end of Grey Howl, you'll figure some things out. But I leave the whole werewolf thing open-ended, partly because I have another book due in November, so I at least have that book to resolve it.
You
But-
know that, yeah.
It would be horrible if you did. Well, my Theta series just ended, so I do know that.
Did you have a wake for Theta?
I didn't. I still think I might go back to her, but I did sort of.
Well, I mean,
you know.
given the publishing world today, you can. You have the option.
Yeah, it's true. You can self-publish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's changing like weekly these days, so it's kind of hard to keep up with.
Have you had editors change on you?
once. One decided to leave editing altogether and became a fundraiser for a volleyball team. I can figure that one out. The other one I've been with since, except she keeps having babies, as I say, so I get handed off to her fill-in. The regular one's better than the fill-in, but, you know.
I had an editor leave publishing because she wanted to leave New York after 9/11. And I
She
had,
couldn't do it long distance?
I wish she had, I liked her. And I
All
had,
electronic now anyway.
I had an editor who left when she had her baby and then never came back. And so, you know, it was an orphan book.
Yeah, it's sad. It gets lost in the cracks. Well, the worst part, I think, is when you have a romance and you do have to pace yourself, because you don't want to have the series end and have this relationship dangling,
Yeah.
but you don't want to hurry it either because, you know, they're married, how boring, now what?
Though I do like having the ongoing drama of the established relationship. Because I'm sort of sick of the, you know, will they, won't they, will they, won't they.
Yeah, that gets old
Yeah.
at some point.
And being in an established relationship is filled with drama.
There are always challenges. Well, I mean, it's worked for Catherine Hall Page for
Yeah.
quite a while.
Yeah. So, and, you know, and there are other relationships, so. Yeah, my Prue is single, aggressively so, and Dulcie is much more domestic, so. And your characters are single.
So far,
Yeah. Do you see that changing?
yes, at least for some. You know, they're sneaking up on it. There is progression, except for the Irish one, and she's saying, I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out anything. I've suddenly got a new home, a new life, and you want to do what? But for the first time, I actually do have one of those setups where there are two very different characters who are potential love interests.
Oh, that's good.
And, you know, she's been on one date with one of them so far.
Yeah.
Not rushing it.
You just touched on something though. I think one of the keys is that you always have to throw your heroine into something that's unsettling, which is fun.
Tension.
But what?
Tension.
Yeah. But after a while, after you've written a bunch of books, it's a little hard to find a source of tension.
Yes. Well, I read
the
the
werewolf.
early Janet Ivanovich's, and after a few I said, will you please stop waffling between these two guys? And what's she up to now, 18, 20?
Yeah.
And she's still waffling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
I
think
stopped
that's
reading.
why I wanted to Dulcie to have this stable relationship.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna go this
It's-
one or
it
that
just
one.
gets
This one or that
silly.
one. Enough already.
After a while.
Make up your mind or just have a threesome. That's what you want.
Okay. A whole new audience. How are we doing
We're
here?
doing our questions. Do you guys have any questions for us?
Yes. So, I don't read a lot of mysteries, but.
You should.
I should.
We keep
And
writing
now-
them.
And I will, I promise. But,
Oh, yes.
the question is, do you know who's, are they, in your mind, does it start out with somebody like already dead? And then, do you know how they died and how it's gonna get proven or whatever? I mean, do you have that when you start out?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that sounds hard.
Well, the conventional wisdom is you have your body, your crime in the first chapter. I don't think I've ever had a crime in the first chapter.
Why
Just
be
doesn't-
predictable?
I mean, yeah, and plus you'd really like to get to know the characters before you start killing them off or suspecting them of something. So, but sometimes there is no crime. That's very sneaky. Or the crime is 200 years old, which is also interesting. But even so, you know, it's almost like you're challenging yourself the same way you're challenging the reader. You're leaving clues, but you don't always know where it's going yourself. I had one book that may end up as a standalone at some point, in which I changed the villain 3 times in the course of the book. You know, first one, I thought I knew, nah, too obvious. Next one, okay, yeah, but what if it's his friend? No. So finally, the one I ended up on, I had never suspected it, but all the clues fit.
I love when that happens. And that does happen. And actually, the Dulcie that I just finished, I wasn't sure who the murderer was until the very end, and I really did. And it was when I was rereading it, and I was like, hoping this would happen, and it did. When I read it through, I realized
Yeah.
who it was.
See, sometimes your subconscious is doing things that you don't know about.
And actually, I poo-pooed this. In this one, I do start out with the dead body because that was fun. That was the, Polly. Polly doesn't want a cracker. Polly doesn't want anything anymore.
Yeah.
But when you start thinking about a murder, all the complications are like why, you suddenly realize you need motive, and it can't be an obvious motive, and other people have to have motives that would fit in it. I think this is true for both of them. I think it's true for all of Cozy's. We don't deal with crazed serial killers. Our villains are human, and they're driven by human things. So to some extent, we have to. All my villains have to be driven by something that I could be driven to, only not yet to that extent. So greed, lust, jealousy, anger, it's just something that pushed them a little bit too far. And so once you start that, it's very easy to come up with other people, and anybody, we are all potentially capable of murder if we just struck out a little bit too much, maybe. That's the theory. I think what I do start with, I don't know about you, I usually start with some question or problem. I mean, with parrots, I like the idea. I've been reading about African gray parrots, and that they are now considered to be as intelligent pretty much as a human toddler, and that there's some discussion about whether or not they do just mimic, they just parrot back the sounds, or if to some extent they understand a little bit of what they say. So if a parrot witnessed a murder, it would be interesting to me as a crime writer, because it might mimic back the sounds, and how would you interpret them? And then you have the added thing of, what if the parrot knew something and was trying to communicate something? So that, to me, that was the core of this book. So it was that, rather than almost the who did it. It was more what was going on with the parrot, and what could be believed, and what could you rely on the parrot for? And also, if an animal is just mimicking something, it can be manipulated. So it can be an unreliable witness. What if you just keep repeating to the parrot, Sheila shot him, and then the parrot's just going, Sheila shot him, then you'd end up being a suspect.
The tricky thing when you write cozies is that, on the one hand, you've set up this enclosed community. It's not New York City. There aren't millions of people.
Cabot Cove.
Yes, you have a small group, all of whom know something about each other. But you have to have multiple suspects. You can't just have one obvious one standing in the middle of it waiting for somebody to prove it. And that's difficult, because how can all of these same people have so many reasons to kill someone?
Well, how do you do that? Do you bring in strangers? The trouble then is, if you bring in a stranger every book, it's always the stranger.
Yes and no. Sometimes it's not premeditated. Sometimes it's a crime of opportunity. And as you say, that person just got to a certain point and snapped, and no one would have seen it coming. Let's see what the current one. The current one, there's some misdirection going on. You have a suspect fairly early on, but that person didn't do it. But he's not saying who did. And you do have to vary things.
One thing I'm toying with, I'm wondering if I ever want to have a regular character be a murderer. I don't know if the readers would like that.
Like an avenging angel in the community or something.
Or, just somebody who has been a regular minor character, if I want to write her or him out. I don't know.
Well, in Monument to the Dead, hey, we finally got to the current book. I have a character who appeared in the last book, and I had in the back of my mind I might want him in the next book, without giving too much away. But I figured, that is something you kind of trick or fool the reader, saying, oh, he's already an established character, he couldn't possibly do it. But you can only do that like once.
Do you write sequentially? It sounds like we both do. But do you
Yeah.
ever skip? Do you ever insert boring bit later?
Not so much. There are chapters you really want to write, that you're really looking forward to writing, but you sort of have to dangle those as a treat. You have to get through the slow stuff first. I mean, I get to the middle of a book and oh my God, I don't have a whole book here. I've got an ending, I've got a beginning, but there's this void in the middle, and you just have to slog through it.
I find I have a lot of, my first drafts, I have a lot of dialogue that's just dialogue,
Yeah.
like with no physical. Quote, 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 answer, question,
Yeah.
and
Don't
then
they do anything? Stand up, sit
stand
down.
up, just do something, plop in a chair. Karen Olson, I think it was, told me that when she was reading through her edit, she realized nobody ever sat down. Everyone was just constantly plopping in a chair.
Like, yeah,
Which I can
or
relate
dropping
to.
in a chair. Mine drink coffee all the time, endlessly.
Mine, I think, I'm afraid mine sigh a lot, and I really
Yep,
have to watch
yep.
that.
Mine nod too.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
I had
it's very
117
hard.
nods in the last book.
You want someone to acknowledge something.
Yes, non-verbally.
Yes.
I mean, how many ways can you say yes without saying yes?
She nodded in assent. She nodded.
Yes.
She
Or
said.
you nod to indicate somebody over there, communicate across a busy room, or you know, there are lots of things you can do with it, but not every page, apparently.
So, I don't know if this is relevant to you. This is something I was thinking about because somebody else asked me this at a panel. Tell us something about your heroines that they don't know.
I don't know them, but
You don't.
well, it's not. I understand there are people who
It's a
actually
Kate
sit
Flora
down
question.
and write these wonderful, detailed descriptions of the person's entire childhood and everything she thinks and her favorite color and the kind of car she drives. And I don't do that. It sort of accumulates. Although there have been some surprises. So, you know, at some point I did not know this, but like suddenly my character's parents show up. I had never thought about them. You know, she just sprang full blown, but no, and then her mother gets accused of murder. Well, I didn't see that one coming either. But you know, I had to develop a whole relationship in the context of daughter solving mother's accusation of murder. So it makes it fun. It makes it interesting.
I realized it took 6 books that Dulcie is trying very hard. I guess I sort of knew this from the start, but it sort of became more clear to me. Dulcie's main conflict is that she doesn't want to be her mother because she's an academic and her mother is a former hippie and believes she's psychic, which Dulcie probably is. But that's really the drama, the conflict in Dulcie's life is that she isn't her mother. So she's sort of maybe beginning to make peace with that.
Well, it's nice when your characters can grow and move forward somehow. Well, it's also been interesting because I have this ongoing relationship in the Orchard series, and her mother's and father's relationship is very formal if you look at it as an outsider. But in fact, it is a strong relationship. It's just that Meg had been misinterpreting it for years, you know, until things got really...
So she had a blind spot.
She did, yeah. I mean, she thought they were kind of cold, unfeeling people, and no. They've been together for 30 plus years.
Do you intentionally give your characters blind spots? I mean, we can't have them be as all-knowing as we are because we theoretically know more about what's going on.
Well, it's interesting because I was reading something today about, you know, defining the genre. And somebody said that the traditional cozy heroine, and it's usually a woman, is unusually intelligent. I said, oh, well, that's interesting. You know, how do you write a less perceptive heroine?
Well, we all have blind spots.
Yeah. So, but you know, this would be sort of a universal blind spot. Subtleties she just does not see, and maybe somebody else has to point them out to her, or maybe she comes to see them as she gets to know the people. But you know, they aren't all brilliant from the start. You know, they learn.
We all have biases depending on what we do. I mean, I guess I'm sort of getting back into Dulcie mode, so I can come for because she's an academic. She sees everything in a particular mindset, which actually helps her at times very much solve crimes because she looks for textual clues. But I have been told by critics that she's naive, which I don't see because she's part of me. But so I have been told. So that's I guess her blind spot / bias.
Well, I've had similar criticisms because a lot of my heroines don't, you know, burst into tears when they come upon a body. They start examining this thing.
Because it's
He's
interesting.
Dead. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But, you know, I didn't know him. But what do we do now? You know, it's not an emotional response. It's a rational response. And people want some emotion.
Before when we were talking about I forget what we were talking about, but I was thinking Cabot Cove. You
Which
were talking
the entire
about
population
limited,
is dead.
Yeah, yes. How can you in a small place
Kill
have a couple of, we were talking about in a small place how can you have several suspects, but the same thing in a small place in a cozy, how can you keep coming up with murders? Like after a while, listen to somebody say that's like the worst small town in the world. Everyone dies.
Yeah.
So how do you cope with that? 'Cause I don't know if I have an answer yet.
It's even more difficult in Ireland because, you know, the murder rate is extraordinarily low in Ireland, particularly outside of the cities. And I actually talked to a delightful policeman when I was there last and said, you know, well, how many murders have you had that you investigated out of this office? And, oh, I think 3 in the last decade. And I'm sorry, I've just given you 3 more in the last 3 weeks, you know. So it does have to fit, but you can't have murder central in a small community somewhere. And you can't always have it be the stranger drifting through town.
Yeah. And it doesn't always have to be murder. I mean, in Grey Howl, actually, I wasn't going to have a murder, and then someone is pushed off a balcony, which I really didn't expect to happen, and I found it quite upsetting. So I think it was actually rather good.
Okay, emotional response. This
But-
was shocking.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know how to deal with that because yes, at some point, either they're just going to clear off the campus or clear out the town and
Or
say
nobody's going to apply to
no
the
one's
college.
gonna- really. That's a hard
Dangerous.
one, but that's what was it? That's the Murder She Wrote.
Yeah,
What that's from.
very successful, but they eventually had to get her out of Cabot Cove and send
Yeah.
her on tour somewhere.
Road trip.
Yes,
Yeah.
where bodies followed her.
I guess one of the solutions to that is to have a crime that isn't a murder.
Yeah, occasionally.
Which you've done.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have done that. I mean, there were threats, there was violence involved, but nobody died.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a woman who was attacked and put in a coma, conveniently, so she couldn't say what had happened to her, but then she wakes up in the end.
Uh-huh.
I have another question. So you guys write cozies. Are there other names for the other types of mystery novels?
Yes.
Could you share that?
Yes, there's a spectrum. I guess cozies, and then what is it? I'd say,
Well, you got procedurals,
well,
which
police
involve
procedurals.
an official representative, police, FBI.
You've got your
whatever.
hard-boiled
Yes,
noir,
yes, which are grittier and more depressing.
and there are grades of that. There's like hard-boiled, medium-boiled.
Soft
And I saw
core?
one today I hadn't seen before, with tarte noir,
Tart
a
noir.
gritty female PI.
Wow, I heard femme noir.
Okay.
I wanted Prue to be feminine. I was reading a lot of, there's this new female-oriented noir, noir is like the classic Raymond Chandler, real tough. Writers like Megan Abbott, or like Queen Pin is one of her titles, which sort of says it all. They're really, really tough babes, and they're just killer women, I mean, literally killer women. And I love them, they're great books, and I wanted to write one of those. And I was reading a bunch of them, and I wanted Prue to be that. Only, I am who I am, so she had a cat. And the cat is tougher than she is. But, so tarte noir, yeah, so police procedural, I guess, would be far out on this, because that's sort of a whole police thing, and then you've got noir, or maybe police procedural is in the middle. Maybe my whole idea of a spectrum is
Well,
false.
I think, no, I think you're right, but police procedurals can span.
Yeah.
And then you've got
What
like,
else
you
is
know,
there?
Christian mysteries, which are very clean,
What?
But they
or-
must
or
be like cozy.
inspirational.
I don't think
Yeah.
there are Jewish
I-
mysteries. Well, actually there are, there's
Of
the
course
Rabbi,
there
the
are.
Kellerman
Yes,
ones.
Miss
Yeah.
Kellerman
But
and
they're-
Eileen Schneider.
Yeah. But they're sort of, they're cozy stuff.
Yeah.
What else is, I feel like there are more classifications than I just framed it.
Isn't there something like
Well, we've-
gothic?
A gothic is-
Not just romance, but
Well,
gothic
historic.
mysteries too.
I can go into Gothics because Dulcie is a scholar of the original Gothic. My friend Lisa is slapping me because she knows I'm going to go into a role. The original Gothics were highly emotional, adventurous novels written in the 1790s originally. Carried on. I mean, you can say the Brontes are Gothics. You had a newly literate. Women were newly literate, and a lot of women were writing them as well. They were called the she authors. So you have 2 she authors with you today, and they still are not respected. The ones that are respected are largely by women. The Anne Radcliffe, but you've got like Horace Walpole, people like that. The Castle of Otranto. Those are, but they're very emotional. They're horribly overwritten. They're really fun. They're full of ghouls and ghosts and seductions and rapes, though it's written very discreetly. There's a ton of anti-Catholic prejudice in them.
Really?
Yeah. And you know, well, you've got all the wars that are going on, the French Revolution, and everything, so yeah, they're just wild books, and because they were written largely by women and largely for women, that's why I have my Dulcie is studying them, because I saw them as a parallel for the mysteries today. But they aren't essentially mysteries; they're adventure stories and ghost stories and romances. But there's a lot of them for that. That's my take on that.
Okay. I haven't written one. But never say never.
Yeah. Just load on the
Or
adjectives.
historicals.
And
I mean,
often
they-
they were, historical mysteries, that's,
Yep.
yeah. Those are great. A lot of historical mysteries, they do a lot of research for those.
Oh, yeah.
One of the better authors,
Well, that's where being an academic or being a nitpicker really trips you up, because you want everything to be accurate.
Well, the trouble with a badly written historical is somebody dumps their notebook into it. So. But there are excellent ones out there.
I know one name you probably recognize wrote a very nice historical mystery set in, I think it was 18th century England, and she was talking about her father's lovely writing desk that she inherited, and she said, but there were no pictures in the desk. Excuse me, photography hadn't been invented yet. It won't be around for another 40 years.
It could have been miniatures. Little insect miniatures.
That's right.
You were mentioning the various editing that you do and others do. I don't have a sense of what the process is. I know you finish what you feel is finished and send it off.
To be shredded.
Yeah.
To be eviscerated.
Well, when I refer, my agent, bless her, is an early reader of mine, and I have friends who read, and my husband reads. So then when it goes off, the editor reads it, and that's the editor who makes the decision about, yes, this has been accepted, I will cut you the check for the rest of your advance, or part of your advance, whatever. And she'll be reading it for the story. You know, like, well, I think that the mystery is solved too early, or this character is a bit flat, or, you know, that kind of stuff. And
A good editor.
a good editor, yes. Well, bad editor will say those things too, but they'll be wrong. Yeah, the character's not flat, it's the best thing I ever wrote. And so it's sort of like just the basic, the overall, actually, like, does this story work? Where can you tighten it? And ideally it is like a, you know, I love this book. There's always this is a great book, I love this, and then the next paragraph begins, but. And it's, you know, but I really think in the second half, you use the same verb all the time, and besides that, all the characters change their names and they're bad. And you know, so like I've gotten back the edits on the next Prue book, and I was telling Sheila before we started, I wrote my thank you letter to my editor because I know I'm going to get angry. So I wrote, thank you so much for your input, and of course I can meet the deadline, I'll get you these back right after Labor Day. Because I'm going to read it and I'm going to get angry, and some of her edits will be good, and some of her edits will be bad, and I'll edit the book and we'll go back and forth a little, you know, I'll revise the book, but I just had to write her the polite letter before I got angry. And then once it's edited, it's like basically you revise, you know, taking from your editor what is good, or what you need to in order for the book to be accepted. And you send it back, and then it goes to a copy editor, and that's what I do professionally, as well as write, which is copy editing is editing, it's like line editing for grammar, style, usage, punctuation, spelling, and that'll be like, well, you use the verb, everyone plops in a chair, nobody sits down, a good copy editor should notice that. And you switch from the present tense to the past tense, and by the way, this isn't actually what this word means. So that's this very specific, and after the copy edits, then you go to page proofs, and that everyone reads that, just hopefully helping to find the error. And I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that about covers it, but there is a range in editors. I've been working with the same one for 8 or 10 books at this point, and I really respect her view of the big picture. I mean, she does see the holes, she does see the weaknesses.
That's good.
Hooray. But we have been butting heads lately in this Irish series because her father is Irish, she spent a year in Dublin in college, and she thinks she knows Ireland, except she knows Dublin. And I'm writing about the far left corner. And, you know, the language is different, the attitudes are different, and so, you know, we keep going back and forth on this, and she throws in a slang phrase, I'm saying, I don't think they'd say that. You know, but I mean, that's almost the copy edit level, except the copy editor's never gonna understand half of that stuff.
Yeah.
But generally she's right, and generally I also tend to repeat myself a lot. You know, it's like, just to make sure I make this point, I put it in 3 different places and forget to take out 2 of them. So she gets that. However, she took 5,000 words out of the last one, and I put 12,000 back. All new ones. So, you know, it's a dialogue, it really is. And it's great when you have someone you work well with.
I have one editor who I love and who gets my humor, and one editor who I have to write the response letter to.
Yeah.
And then I'll
Yeah, well,
read
she
her.
might be watching Brookline cable access.
Who shall be nameless.
Who shall be nameless? Yes, I shall not name her. But I'll read her. You know, because even a stop clock is read twice a day. I will read her memos. There will be 1 or 2 things, and then I will revise as I would revise. It's sort of a pity. I wish I had a better editor for that series, but I don't.
Yeah, I read a novel once that was set in a magazine. Actually, it was one of Calvin Trillin's novels. And in this, there was a writer who would bounce around from department to department, and he would deliberately put something in he knew that the editor would hate to distract him from the stuff that he thought was important.
Oh, I like that.
And so the editor, so it would come back with the sort of excess snipped out, and then the good stuff left alone.
I like
Have you ever
that.
tried
Yes,
that?
that's very
Calvin
strategic.
Trillin, smart man. I can see doing.
Here's the ringer stuff that you can cut out.
Yeah. I think we all have strategies for dealing with the bad editing. I know a lot of copy editors tend to be overzealous, and I know at least one writer who got a stamp made up. Stet means leave it as is.
Yeah.
Stet.
Yes.
Like couldn't even be bothered to write stet.
I mean, most copy editors, certainly at Berkeley, are outsiders. They're hired, you know, per book.
Well, that's recent. That's just like
Really?
That's just in the last decade.
But I swear they changed the rules from one book to the next, like on uses of commas. I say, excuse me, didn't we fix that last time? No, we're doing it the other way now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They should have a style book, but
They
with
should, but
freelancers,
it changes. I swear it changes.
I believe it changes.
I think they're messing with us.
Yeah. And sometimes you learn things like my Dulcie series is it's a British publisher. So at one point when I said somebody was pissed, the copy editor noted, "Can we just say she's drunk?" She's annoyed.
Yeah. Slang is a problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually I think the Dulcie books are now sort of half English and half American, but nobody gets pissed anymore unless they're at a pub.
Because they can get drunk and angry.
They can, yes, they can get pissed and pissed.
Hence violence and murder. Oh, I can see it. This is an idea. So when you're writing multiple series, do you ever get a fourth idea? Like, oh, here's a whole new series I could create? And what do you do when that happens, when you're on those tight deadlines to turn up 3 or the 2 series that you're already writing?
I have an idea that I want to do, and it's driving me nuts because I don't know when I'll do it. What I have to start doing is writing things down. That sounds so basic, but I just haven't done it. But yes, I have. Well, sometimes you can do it in a short story. I mean, I just did a short story for the next level best.
Level best.
And I thought, you know what a sulky is?
Yes.
A sulky is a seal woman. What if
If you're Irish, you do.
and I'm Russian, Romanian, Jewish, so go figure. But I thought a selkie goes to her gynecologist, and that was the basis for a story. And I don't think this.
Say what?
Well, you know how maybe this is just my doctor, but she always goes, "Do you feel safe in your relationship?" And that's always it's like just their standard question to make sure you're it's. And I thought, wow, look, you're a selkie. So I got a short story.
Interesting.
I don't think that's going to be a book. So that was easy because it was just this short idea. So it's like I could just lock myself in my office and just write it. But I do have. It
How
seems
does this help you
perfectly
get to the
natural.
guy to college?
Well, she's in her human form.
Okay, good.
She just doesn't have her silk skin. But
Read the Level Best Anthology, it's a great one.
this is how we function, though. These things occur to us, and you write them.
Yeah, the what ifs, yeah.
What if? Yeah, what if?
Well, I mean, I came up with an idea that I haven't executed, but I could either put it in the Orchard one, or I could do it as a short story, and I was waiting to see if it fit somewhere as a subplot. It didn't, so it's gonna be a little short story somewhere.
Well, that's yeah. I mean, what if you have an idea? It's sort of you can weave them in
Yeah.
to the things that you're contracted to write and you need ideas for.
In that great
You need
gaping
some-
middle.
Yeah. And this is they call it a diva problem. It's like, oh, somebody wants to publish my book. I have to come up with a book for them. Life is rough. But it's still a problem. But sometimes you just, well, you are writing 3 series because you had this other idea you wanted to write.
Mhm.
So, I mean, did you just pitch it or did you write? Because usually, when you sell a novel, a fiction to anything in fiction, you have to write the whole thing. But you already knew this editor, so did you write the whole first book or did you just pitch it on
She wasn't my editor for the first series, the one under a pseudonym. I forget when that one left and she came on. The Orchard Mystery, I had one written. I mean, when I started writing, it was like being high on something that I don't even know what, but I couldn't stop. And every time I came up with a story, I didn't want to lose a character, so I kept writing series. I mean, eventually I calmed down, but I had this reservoir of stuff ready, and the Orchard Mysteries actually had a ghost in it originally. We eliminated the ghost. We changed a few things. It's not a bed and breakfast. There's no spirit floating around, but the setting is the same. The other characters are the same. Okay. That was the work of the editor and the pitch. Let's see, where was I going with that?
Ideas that you have. Oh, do you write a full book? But you do.
I did, sort of accidentally, long before anybody was interested, long before I had an agent or was trying to sell any of these things. I had a lot of fun. I have a whole series that was sort of gritty, romantic suspense that never went anywhere. But there were 4.5 books before I quit. I was out of a job at the time. So it was sometimes, yeah, I did my first ebook called Once She Knew was completely out of the genre. It's a romantic suspense about a feminist professor at a women's college who has no patience with love, and oh gee, it's a romance, and gets sucked in by this guy and ends up fleeing the FBI across the country and saving the first lady from an assassination attempt. I mean, this is not like nothing else I write. But there's no reason why there couldn't be another one, because they're a great sparring couple.
Yeah.
Moonlighting. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And it's fun.
I think that I'm gonna. Okay, I'm gonna say this publicly, so this will make me do it. This other
On
idea
tape.
that I have, I'm saying it on tape. I'm thinking. Let's see, the next Dulcie's due in November, so I'm thinking this will be a good thing to work on over the holidays in the winter. And I have this sort of inchoate sense of what I want it to be, but I don't yet have the parrot or the werewolf's house. I don't have the one thing that will, that I feel like once I have it, I'll be able to sit down and write it, even if it's just to bash out something really rough. And I don't have that yet, but I just have little clouds.
Well, see, the subconscious is working on it. So we're
That's the
just
theory.
let it go.
Yeah, that's when you're doing the 5th load of laundry
Right.
and and cutting the vegetables finer for soup,
Look,
because you're supposed to be writing it. So you have to say it's back burner and it's working.
to go back to the things you don't know about your heroine, in Monument to the Dead, I was doing something like laundry or driving to the grocery store, and this pops into my head, she knows how to shoot a gun. It's never come up anywhere. Why? Well, she's going to need to.
Do you know how to shoot? Have you learned how to shoot?
Yes. Because we inherited some weapons, and I was also interested for, mystery writing reasons, and Sisters in Crime offered several opportunities to...
Next time they have that, I have to do that.
Oh, this is great fun. This is an organization we both belong to. There are men, but it's mostly women mystery writers. But every couple of years they alternate. They set up a day at a gun range, with a lot of usually ex-military guys who are just thrilled to teach us all what to do. But the good thing is you can try out almost any weapon, you know, from machine guns to Dirty Harry to pistols. It's wonderful.
Because I shot BB guns in summer camp. That's what I did. I have to learn.
Well, you haven't lived till you try whatever it is, Magnum.
I don't have an excuse for it because neither of these heroines will ever
Yeah.
shoot a gun.
But yeah,
but
I mean, none of mine have.
Once my arm heals.
Until recently, oh, you know how to shoot.
Prue can shoot.
And I don't even
Prue can
tell
definitely shoot
why
something.
she knows how to shoot until the next book. See, that's holding something over.
So what are your next deadlines?
October 1st is the Nameless. I now have these things in sync every 4 months. Pub date and due date for each series is the same going forward. It's wonderful having a regular schedule.
So 3 months to write, 1 month to revise?
Yeah, personally, and then we get into the whole editing.
That's
So the next
That's
Orchard
wonderful.
one, I'm writing, it has no name, but the next Orchard one that comes out is Golden Malicious. And boy, that involves everything. I created a crime in that one that the federal government doesn't even recognize. I love this. My husband had a role in this because he's an entomologist. It's an entomological crime. Yeah, who knew? The next Irish one is due February, and the next one comes out in February, Scandal and Skibbereen. It's a lovely name. And then the next museum book is due June 1st, I think. That one's actually written.
Oh, wow. You're a good game.
That one doesn't have a name either, except I'm rewriting part of the Revolutionary War.
Great how it works.
Sorry,
I know I've got Ferrets No Fear because I've been wanting to use that one. I have a recurring
Has
ferret
ferrets in
character.
it? Oh, lovely, yeah.
So I have to learn more about ferrets. I have to love that. And yeah, but the November 1st one, I will start right after Labor Day when I get my edits in. September, October. It'll work.
So our schedules aren't that different.
Just don't if you haven't lifted weights for 6 weeks,
Start slow.
start slow. That was the stupidest thing I ever did. We should probably wind this up. Does anyone have any last questions or
Nobody's gonna ask, how do you get an agent?
practice?
Yeah. Just keep writing, something's gonna work eventually.
Yeah, just keep writing. Be bad, write badly. Guess I'll hand it over to you. Thank you all for coming out today.
Thank you.